In 1987, 1 out of every 5 mattresses sold in America was a vinyl bag filled with water. Nobody questioned it. The whole decade ran on that same logic. Buy it, break it, buy another one. Here are 30 funny household items from the 1980s that made no sense. Before you even sat down in a 1980s bathroom, you had to negotiate with a fuzzy toilet lid cover that refused to stay up. These shag-carpeted accessories came in every shade Sears could dream up: dusty rose, mocha brown, sun orange, moss green, and they arrived as part of a matching set that included a tank cover, a contour rug, and sometimes a carpeted tissue box holder. The pile was thick enough to trap moisture, hair, and questions about hygiene that nobody wanted to ask out loud. The lid never stayed propped open because the extra bulk made it top-heavy, which meant it slammed down without warning. Washing them was technically possible, but no amount of hot water could undo what happened when shag nylon lived next to a toilet for 6 months. Your grandmother had one in powder blue. Your aunt had one in harvest gold, and somewhere in a landfill, millions of them are still holding moisture. The clapper was supposed to be the future of home automation. Introduced in 1985 by a California businessman named Joseph Pedot, this sound-activated switch plugged into any wall outlet and promised hands-free control of your lamps and appliances. 2 claps turned on the first device. 3 claps activated the second. The jingle, clap on, clap off, burrowed into the national consciousness and never left. The problem was that the clapper could not tell the difference between a deliberate hand clap and a dog barking, a door slamming, or a particularly dramatic moment on the television. Lights flickered during action movies. Fans started spinning when someone laughed too hard. The technology that was supposed to eliminate the walk to the light switch created a new problem: living in fear of making any sudden noise after bedtime. Pedot sold more than 7 million units before selling the company in 2018. A full-size waterbed, once filled, weighed approximately 1,600 pounds. Installing one meant dragging a garden hose through your house, filling a vinyl bladder with up to 235 gallons of water, and hoping your floor joists could handle it. By 1987, 22% of all mattresses sold in America were waterbeds, a $2 billion industry built on the promise of comfort and the reality of seasickness. You had to add conditioner annually to prevent algae from growing inside the mattress. You needed a heater because sleeping on cold water was miserable. And if your cat or a stray action figure punctured the vinyl, you woke up in a swamp. Landlords banned them. Renters' insurance refused to cover them. Moving required draining the entire thing with an electric pump and starting over. The inventor, Charles Hall, created his prototype as a graduate thesis at San Francisco State in 1968, and he reportedly still sleeps on one today. If it could be coated in brass, the 1980s made sure it was. Cabinet pulls, towel racks, lamp bases, picture frames, faucets, shower doors, curtain rods, and ceiling fan blades, all gleaming in that warm yellow gold tone that screamed prosperity to anyone who walked through the front door. A single bathroom could contain brass on the faucet, the towel ring, the toilet paper holder, the light switch plate, and the mirror frame, creating an effect that was less elegant and more like standing inside a trumpet. Keeping it polished was a part-time job. Brass tarnished in humid rooms, turned green near water, and showed every fingerprint. Families kept tubes of Brasso under the sink the way later generations would keep stainless steel cleaner. By the mid-1990s, brushed nickel and chrome had quietly taken over, and entire neighborhoods spent their weekends unscrewing brass hardware and pretending they had never loved it. The brass at least served a function, the country geese did not. In the late 1980s, ceramic geese wearing fabric bonnets and bows appeared on kitchen counters and front porches across suburban America with no explanation. They stood about 14 inches tall, painted white with orange beaks, and dressed in outfits that changed with the season. A tiny raincoat for spring, a miniature flag cape for the 4th of July, a pilgrim hat for Thanksgiving. You could buy the goose and then subscribe essentially to a wardrobe. Entire cottage industries existed to produce nothing but goose outfits. The geese were almost always displayed in pairs, positioned near the stove or beside the back door, staring blankly at anyone who entered. Most were paired with matching wallpaper borders, featuring more geese, sometimes wearing the same bonnets. Nobody remembers who started it. Nobody remembers who stopped it. They simply arrived, occupied every kitchen in the country, and vanished sometime around 1993. Vertical blinds could be found on nearly every sliding glass door in America throughout the 1980s, and not one set ever worked properly. Long plastic slats hanging from a track, opening and closing with a pull chain or a wand. That was the concept. The execution was a disaster. At least one slat was always crooked. The track jammed constantly. Walking through meant getting slapped by rigid plastic strips that clattered together like a percussion instrument designed by someone who hated music. They collected dust in the track mechanism with an efficiency that suggested it was their actual purpose. Opening them fully required a technique nobody could agree on. Some pulled the chain, some used the wand, some just shoved the slats aside by hand, bending several permanently. Replacement slats never matched because the plastic yellowed at different rates depending on sun exposure. By the mid-90s, manufacturers like Levolor were pushing horizontal mini blinds as the upgrade, but the verticals held on in rental apartments for another full decade. Builders in the 1980s sprayed a bumpy textured coating onto ceilings because it was cheap, fast, and hid every imperfection in the drywall underneath. They called it popcorn ceiling, though cottage cheese ceiling was equally popular as a name for something that looked like the surface of the moon had been glued overhead. The texture absorbed sound, which builders marketed as a feature. It also absorbed cigarette smoke, cooking grease, and dust, which nobody mentioned. Touching it caused small white chunks to break off and fall into your eyes, your hair, or your dinner. Painting over it was nearly impossible without knocking pieces loose. Removing it meant scrapers, plastic sheeting, and the kind of language you did not want your kids to hear. Homes built before 1980 often contained asbestos in the popcorn mixture, turning a cosmetic nuisance into a health hazard requiring professional abatement. Millions of American homes still have them, and millions of homeowners are still pretending not to notice. Somewhere around 1984, someone decided that a strip of patterned paper running along the top of a wall would make any room feel finished. Wallpaper borders spread through American homes like a decorative virus. Kitchens got fruit motifs, bathrooms got seashells and anchors, nurseries got teddy bears, and living rooms got ivy vines that fooled no one. Applying them required a trough of water, a smoothing brush, and a tolerance for imprecision that most people lacked. The edges curled within weeks. The seams separated. The paste dried unevenly, leaving bubbles that made the wall look blistered. Removing them years later was worse. The adhesive bonded to the paint, and pulling the border off meant pulling the paint with it, leaving a ragged stripe of exposed drywall around the entire room. The borders were supposed to be a compromise, the personality of wallpaper without the commitment. They delivered the commitment without the personality. It started as dried flowers and ended as a bowl of chemically dyed wood chips soaked in synthetic fragrance, sitting on the coffee table next to a stack of magazines nobody read. Potpourri was everywhere in the 1980s. By 1986, companies were selling simmering potpourris designed for stovetop heating, filling kitchens with a smell that was supposed to resemble cinnamon, but often resembled a candle factory fire. Rival, the company behind the crock-pot, released a dedicated potpourri crock, a small ceramic plug-in that kept the dried mixture warm, as advertised in the 1989 Sears Christmas Wish book. The pieces looked enough like candy that small hands reached into the bowl constantly. Nobody could explain what problem potpourri solved. The house did not smell bad before, it just did not smell like a craft store had exploded in the living room, and apparently that was unacceptable. Of all the decisions the 1980s made about interior design, putting wall-to-wall carpet in the bathroom was the one that aged the worst. Soft and warm underfoot, and absolutely incapable of handling the one thing a bathroom produces in abundance: moisture. The carpet surrounded the toilet, crept up to the base of the shower, and in the most committed households ran right to the edge of the bathtub. Spills soaked in. Steam settled. The padding underneath became a breeding ground for mold you could not see but could eventually smell, a damp sweetness that no air freshener could mask. Cleaning meant dragging a vacuum into the bathroom regularly, which felt less like housekeeping and more like admitting defeat. The color choices made it worse: seafoam green, peach, powder blue, or mauve that showed every water stain. Tile existed. Linoleum existed. The entire history of waterproof flooring was available, and the 80s looked at all of it and chose carpet. If the bathroom carpet was a quiet failure, the flowbee was a loud one, literally. In 1988, a San Diego carpenter named Rick Huntz began airing infomercials for a haircutting device that attached to your home vacuum cleaner. The machine sucked hair into a plastic chamber, ran it past oscillating blades, and deposited the clippings into the vacuum canister. No mess, no barber, no dignity. Huntz had patented the device in 1987 after demonstrating it at county fairs, where volunteers let one side of their head be cut with scissors and the other with the flowbee. The noise was staggering. Reviewers compared the combined roar of the vacuum and clippers to standing inside an airplane hangar. Conair and Remington both passed. Hair salons refused to stock it, worried it might actually work. By 2000, 2 million units had shipped from a factory in Kerrville, Texas. Wayne's World spoofed it as the suck cut, and George Clooney admitted in 2020 that he had used one for over 20 years. Ron Popeil had a lifelong hatred of incompletely blended scrambled eggs, and instead of using a fork like everyone else, he invented a machine to fix it from inside the shell. The Ronco inside the shell egg scrambler worked by piercing one end of a raw egg with a thin motorized needle that spun at high speed, blending the yolk and white before the shell was cracked. The result was a uniformly yellow hard-boiled egg. No streaks, no yolk pockets, just solid golden protein. Mobile Magazine ranked it 84th on its list of the top 100 gadgets of all time, a ranking that says more about the list than the gadget. The device required batteries, a steady hand, and the kind of patience that most breakfast routines did not accommodate. A fork and a bowl accomplished the same thing in 4 seconds. Popeil did not care. He had identified a problem that existed only in his own kitchen and sold the solution to millions of people who had never once looked at their eggs and complained. Every Thanksgiving in the 1980s, someone's father stood at the head of the table holding a buzzing electric carving knife like a man who had been handed a small chainsaw and told to perform surgery. Hamilton Beach and Black & Decker sold millions of these motorized blades, marketing them as the modern way to slice a turkey. The reality was a vibrating two-bladed device that sprayed hot grease across the tablecloth and produced slices that looked like they had been cut during an earthquake. The noise could clear a room, a high-pitched whine layered over a mechanical grinding that made conversation impossible until the bird was dismantled. Cleaning was an ordeal because the blades detached, but the handle did not open, leaving a gap where grease hardened. Most families used it once a year and spent 20 minutes on Thanksgiving morning trying to remember where they put it. But wait, there's more. Those 4 words sold more cheap knives in the 1980s than any blade maker could have predicted. Ginsu knives were not Japanese. They were stamped steel manufactured in Fremont, Ohio, by a company called Quikut, marketed by 2 ad men from Rhode Island named Ed Valenti and Barry Betcher, who invented the name because it sounded exotic. The infomercials were masterpieces of controlled absurdity, a knife slicing through a tin can, then a shoe, then a radiator hose, and still cutting a tomato paper thin. Nobody needed a knife that could cut through a shoe, but the dramatic footage and the promise of free steak knives if you called in the next 15 minutes moved an estimated $75 million in product. The knives were decent for the price, around $10, but they were not special. The marketing was the entire product. Ginsu knives at least cut things. Mauve did nothing except exist on every surface of the American home for an entire decade. This dusty pink-purple, not quite pink, not quite lavender, not quite anything with a name people could agree on, colonized walls, bedspreads, sofas, bathroom tile, and carpet with a thoroughness that suggested central planning. Bathrooms paired mauve tile with mauve towels and mauve soap dishes. Bedrooms layered mauve comforters over mauve sheets beneath mauve curtains. The color was often joined by its co-conspirators, dusty blue, mint green, and pale yellow, creating a pastel palette that made every room look like the inside of a jewelry box. By the mid-80s, refusing mauve was a decorating rebellion. Hardware stores stocked it in every product category. Paint companies gave it names like Desert Dusk and Antique Rose to disguise the fact that it was the same color in every house on the block. For about $12, you could turn a perfectly normal pair of jeans into something that looked like it had been attacked by a rhinestone factory. The bedazzler, originally sold as the Ronco Rhinestone Stud Setter before a rebrand, was a handheld press that punched metal-pronged studs into fabric. You loaded a stone, positioned it against your denim, and squeezed. The results were permanent, which meant every mistake was also permanent. Crooked lines of rhinestones marched across jean jackets, purses, sneakers, and baseball caps in households across the country. The infomercials showed elegant patterns, but most home bedazzling produced abstract chaos. The studs caught on other clothing in the wash and scratched anyone who sat in the wrong chair. It is still sold today. The J.R. Simplot Company, the Idaho potato empire that supplied French fries to McDonald's, decided that frozen fries were not convenient enough and created Micro Magic, a line of microwavable fast food sold throughout the mid-1980s. The fries came in a sleeve supposed to crisp them during heating. They did not crisp. They steamed into a limp, slightly translucent version of what fries should be. But the true achievement was the Micro Magic milkshake, a frozen milkshake you heated in the microwave. The instructions said to microwave for about 30 seconds, which raised the question of why anyone would warm a milkshake. The answer was that the shake was frozen solid and needed heating to reach drinkable consistency. It came in chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and orange. The concept violated everything a milkshake was supposed to be. Chia. 3 syllables and a stutter sold more ceramic animals than anyone had a right to expect. Introduced in 1982 by Joseph Enterprises, the Chia pet was a hollow terracotta figure, a ram, a bull, a puppy, that you soaked, smeared with moistened chia seeds, and placed on a sunny windowsill. Over the next 2 weeks, the seeds sprouted into a patchy green fur that was supposed to resemble a coat, but usually resembled mold. The growth was never even. One side flourished while the other stayed bare, giving the animal the look of something with a serious skin condition. Overwatering produced white fungus. Underwatering produced nothing. Joseph Enterprises sold millions anyway, releasing new designs yearly, including a human skull. The product had no practical use, no lasting result, and no reason to exist, making it the default gift for someone you did not know well. Walk into any suburban kitchen in the 1980s, and there was a decent chance you would find 2 enormous wooden utensils hanging on the wall beside the stove. The giant fork and spoon, typically 3 feet long, carved from a single piece of wood, served no purpose whatsoever. They could not be used for cooking or serving. They were purely decorative, which is a generous word for objects that looked like props from a dinner party hosted by giants. They hung from nails and collected grease film from the stove, dust from the ceiling fan, and bewildered stares from visitors. Nobody remembers buying them. They seemed to arrive with the house. They were often accompanied by a matching wooden rack holding copper-bottomed pots that were also never used. The fork and spoon said, "This is a kitchen," in case the oven and refrigerator left any doubt. If oversized utensils announced the kitchen, mirrored walls announced the living room, and the dining room, the bedroom, and sometimes the ceiling. The 1980s had an obsession with reflective surfaces that went far beyond a bathroom mirror. Floor-to-ceiling panels covered accent walls. Mirrored coffee tables reflected the carpet back at itself. Closet doors were replaced with full-length mirrored sliders that showed you exactly how confused you looked while getting dressed. The idea was that mirrors made rooms feel larger, which was technically true, but the effect was less elegance and more visual chaos. Every piece of clutter doubled, Every awkward family dinner reflected from 3 angles. They showed fingerprints instantly and required weekly cleaning. Removing mirrored panels was a renovation nightmare because the adhesive bonded to the drywall, and pulling a panel meant taking the wall apart with it. Glass blocks showed up in 1980s bathrooms the way brass showed up on fixtures. Suddenly, everywhere, and without explanation. These thick, translucent squares of pressed glass were stacked like bricks and mortared into walls, creating partitions that let light through while blocking any useful view. Builders installed them around shower enclosures, beside front doors, and as accent walls in basements, promising a modern look inspired by Miami Art Deco. The result was a wall that made everything behind it look like it was underwater. The blurred shapes moving behind the glass were often more unsettling than a clear view would have been. Each block weighed several pounds, and a full wall added significant structural load. Replacing a cracked block meant chipping out the mortar without breaking the neighbors. The style vanished in the 90s, returned briefly around 2005, and has been cycling in and out ever since, never quite dying and never quite making sense. In 1985, a toy company called Worlds of Wonder released Teddy Ruxpin, and what they created was closer to a haunted object than a stuffed animal. The bear had a cassette player built into its back. You inserted a story tape, pressed play, and the mouth and eyes moved in sync with the narration, in theory. In practice, the synchronization drifted. The mouth opened when it should have been closed. The eyes blinked at random. When the batteries died mid-story, the voice slowed to a deep, distorted growl that sent kids screaming out of the room. Worlds of Wonder sold the bear for about $70, roughly $180 in today's money, and moved 5 million units in its first 2 years. Kids discovered that inserting non-ruxpin tapes produced a bear that appeared to sing along to pop songs or recite the evening news, which was either hilarious or deeply disturbing depending on your age. The company filed for bankruptcy in 1988, 3 years after the bear's debut. S-Mark Incorporated looked at bacon in the early 1980s and decided the problem was not that people were eating too much of it, but that they felt guilty about it. Their solution was Sizzlean, a processed pork breakfast strip marketed as a healthier alternative. The packaging claimed it was 50% leaner than regular bacon, and the name itself, lean, right there in the word, suggested something approaching a health food. It was not. Sizzlean was still 37% fat by weight. The marketing simply compared it to the fattiest cut of pork belly bacon available, making the reduction sound dramatic when the product was still loaded with grease. It cooked flat, which some people preferred, and it cost less, which most people preferred. The advertising leaned hard into the fitness culture of the decade. Jane Fonda tapes and jazzercise classes, followed by a breakfast of Sizzlean and orange juice, as though the two canceled each other out. A Chicago newspaper columnist named Bob Greene changed the trajectory of a regional soda company in 1985 when he wrote that a 2-calorie chocolate fudge soda had killed his sweet tooth while he was dieting. The A.J. Canfield Company of Chicago had been making this sugar-free chocolate soda quietly since 1972, selling it in modest numbers across the Midwest. Greene's column compared the taste to an ice cream sundae and suggested readers look at a piece of chocolate cake while sipping it. The cities where the column ran went into what Canfield called fudge fever. Over the course of that year, 200 million cans were sold. The factory ran 20 hours a day and still could not keep up. The soda tasted like Diet Cola with a vaguely chocolatey aftertaste. Not terrible, but nowhere near an ice cream sundae. The craze burned out within 2 years. Canfield eventually sold the brand, and the soda faded into the kind of regional memory that makes people from Chicago argue with people from everywhere else. At least the soda was only 2 calories. The sunken living room was a permanent architectural decision that nobody could undo without a contractor. Popular from the late 1960s through the mid-80s, the conversation pit was a recessed section of the floor, usually 2 or 3 steps down from the rest of the house, carpeted in deep shag and surrounded by built-in seating. The idea was intimate socializing. The reality was a tripping hazard that caught every guest who forgot the floor dropped. Carrying drinks across the step was a gamble. Moving furniture in or out required planning. Vacuuming the recessed carpet was an exercise in geometry. The pit collected crumbs, dust, and the occasional toddler who wandered in and could not figure out how to climb back up. Ron Popeil believed that the American man needed to be ready to fish at any moment, and in the 1970s, he created the pocket fisherman to make that possible. It was a collapsible fishing rod with a built-in reel that folded down to about the size of a large flashlight, small enough to fit in a glove compartment, a tackle box, or, as the name implied, a generously sized pocket. The infomercials showed businessmen in suits pulling over on country roads to cast a line into a passing stream, as though spontaneous roadside fishing were a common American need. The rod was underpowered compared to standard equipment and could handle only small freshwater catches. None of that mattered. Popeil sold more than 2 million units by leaning into the fantasy. That adventure could be compact, portable, and always within reach. The Smithsonian Institution eventually archived the device alongside the rest of Popeil's inventions. A cheap FM transmitter shaped like a microphone, Mr. Microphone let you broadcast your voice through any nearby FM radio. Ronco sold it throughout the late 70s and into the 80s with a commercial so memorable it became a cultural reference point. A teenager in a convertible using the device to say, "Hey, good looking, we'll be back to pick you up later," to a woman on the sidewalk, which was considered charming in 1980 and would be considered something else entirely today. The transmission range was about 30 feet, the audio quality was terrible, and the signal interfered with whatever station your car radio was tuned to, which meant anyone within range heard your broadcast whether they wanted to or not. The Simpsons parodied it. Saturday Night Live referenced it. The device cost under $20 and did exactly one thing poorly, which was apparently enough. Great-looking hair formula number 9. That was the actual product name, and somehow it got worse from there. GLH9 was Ron Popeil's most personal invention, an aerosol can that sprayed colored fibers onto thinning hair to create the appearance of fullness. You held the can about 6 inches from your head, sprayed in short bursts, and watched as tiny colored particles attached to your remaining hair and scalp, filling in bald spots with what was essentially spray paint for humans. It came in 9 colors. It cost $39.92. The infomercials showed Popeil himself demonstrating the product on his own head, which gave the whole operation an honesty that most hair loss products lacked. The problem was rain, wind, sweat, and physical contact. Anything that touched the treated area could transfer the colored fibers to collars, pillowcases, and the hands of anyone who ran their fingers through your hair expecting to find hair. The X-Files featured a character watching a GLH9 infomercial, which was the exact audience. By the end of the 1980s, 3 out of every 5 American homes had a standalone answering machine, a cassette tape-powered box that sat next to the telephone and recorded messages from anyone who called while you were out. The machine itself was unremarkable. What made it absurd was the outgoing greeting. Families spent hours recording elaborate messages that featured sound effects, harmonized singing, individual contributions from every household member, including the dog, and comedy sketches that were funny exactly once and then played for every caller for the next 6 months. Some greetings were so long that callers hung up before the beep. Others included disclaimers, inside jokes, and musical intros taped off the radio. The machine became a performance venue, a 30-second stage where ordinary people produced content for an audience of confused callers who just wanted to leave a message. Instead of giving kids candy, give them apple snacks or banana chips. That was Ron Popeil's pitch for the Ronco food dehydrator, and somehow millions of people believed him. The device was a stack of plastic trays with a heating element at the base that slowly removed moisture from whatever you placed inside: fruit, vegetables, meat, herbs, or anything else you had too much of and wanted to turn into a shriveled, leathery version of itself. Popeil's infomercial promised homemade beef jerky for about $3 a pound, and you know what went in it because you made it yourself. The process took anywhere from 4 to 12 hours, filling the kitchen with a warm, concentrated smell of whatever was drying. The dehydrator ran continuously, using electricity the entire time. Most buyers made jerky once, banana chips twice, and then stored the trays in a cabinet where they remained until the next garage sale. Potpourri demonstrated the product on late-night television while wearing his own GLH9 spray-on hair, completing a circle of self-promotion that has never been matched. Pentachlorophenol treated wooden decks stretched across backyards throughout the 1980s, sturdy platforms where families gathered for barbecues and summer afternoons. The chemical treatment promised decades of protection against rot and insects, making it the preferred choice for homeowners wanting outdoor spaces that would last. What nobody explained was that pentachlorophenol seeps slowly to the surface, especially in hot weather, creating invisible residue that transferred to bare feet and hands. Children ran across these decks without shoes, sat on warm planks, and played for hours without anyone suspecting danger. The chemical absorbed through skin and accumulated in bodies over time, causing effects researchers would later link to serious health concerns. When regulators discovered the scope of the problem, residential use was banned, and homeowners were urged to seal or replace treated lumber. Many families who had spent years enjoying their decks faced difficult choices about structures they had built with pride. Today, those old decks remain a reminder that the places where we relax can carry risks we never imagined. Children's metal high chairs without restraints were a familiar sight in homes across the 1970s, their shiny metal frames and simple trays making them look sturdy and dependable. Parents placed their toddlers inside with complete trust, believing the chair's weight alone would keep it stable. But these early designs tipped over easily, especially when a child leaned forward, pushed against the tray, or shifted their weight. Without proper straps, nothing stopped a child from sliding out, standing up, or toppling the entire chair. Emergency rooms saw a disturbing rise in head injuries, broken arms, and frightening falls from these seemingly harmless seats. Investigators found the same design flaws again and again, leading to urgent safety campaigns and eventual bans. Looking back, it is painful to imagine how many parents never realized the danger until it was too late. A piece of furniture meant to protect a child ended up putting them at risk, proving that safety can never be something you assume. Asbestos-backed vinyl floor tiles covered kitchens, bathrooms, and basements in countless 1980s homes, their durability and affordability making them the go-to choice for practical families. The tiles came in cheerful patterns that brightened rooms, and they resisted water, stains, and heavy foot traffic better than almost anything available. Hidden beneath the colorful surface was a layer of asbestos backing that gave tiles their famous strength. Families walked across these floors barefoot, mopped them weekly, and never imagined the material underfoot could be dangerous. The asbestos remained stable as long as tiles stayed intact, but scratching, cracking, or removal released microscopic fibers into the air. Homeowners who pulled up old flooring themselves often did so without masks, inhaling clouds of invisible particles. When health risks of asbestos became undeniable, regulations required professional abatement and safe disposal. Many families discovered their floors were hazardous only when preparing to sell or remodel their homes. The cheerful tiles that seemed so practical now required expensive removal procedures. They remain a stark reminder that danger sometimes lies directly beneath our feet. Hard plastic baby bottles containing BPA were everywhere in the 1970s, tucked into diaper bags, lined up on kitchen counters, and handed to sleepy newborns without a second thought. Parents loved how durable they were, how easily they washed, and how they never shattered like old glass bottles did. They seemed like the safer choice, the practical choice, the modern choice. But inside that strong plastic was a chemical that slowly seeped into the warm milk and formula held inside it, especially when heated in hot water or a sterilizer. That chemical was BPA, and researchers would later discover that even tiny traces could interfere with hormones in infants, affecting development in ways nobody even imagined at the time. What makes it feel even worse is that parents back then genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. They trusted the packaging, they trusted the science, and they trusted the stores that sold these bottles by the millions. When researchers eventually linked BPA to endocrine disruption, the shock was enormous. Suddenly, the object a parent held closest during the earliest days of their child's life was the same object experts were urgently telling them to throw away. The ban came swiftly once the truth sank in, and companies scrambled to replace every design. But the uneasy feeling lingered for years afterward, as parents wondered how something so small and so ordinary had carried a danger no one warned them about. Chlordane-soaked termite barriers were installed beneath foundations throughout the 1980s as the ultimate defense against wood-destroying insects. Pest control companies promised decades of protection, saturating soil with chemicals so persistent that termites would never tunnel through. Homeowners trusted these invisible shields completely, believing their investment would keep structural damage at bay forever. What nobody explained was that chlordane does not simply stay underground. It migrates slowly upward through cracks in concrete, through gaps around pipes, and through air circulating beneath floors. Families lived above these chemical pools for years, breathing vapors that accumulated inside tightly sealed houses designed to conserve energy. Children played on carpets directly over treated soil, and basements carried faint chemical odors people dismissed as normal. When researchers linked chlordane exposure to neurological damage and cancer risks, regulators banned it entirely for residential use. Homeowners were left wondering what had been seeping into their homes for years. Today, chlordane barriers remain troubling examples of how protection can turn into contamination without anyone noticing. Cadmium-plated ice trays looked sleek, shiny, and perfectly modern in the 1970s kitchen, especially beside the newest refrigerators. Metal trays froze water quickly, popped out cubes cleanly, and felt sturdier than plastic. But the smooth silver finish that made them look so refined came from cadmium, a heavy metal that slowly flaked off and mixed into the ice. People placed these contaminated cubes into children's drinks, iced tea pitchers, holiday punch bowls, and never suspected a thing. Over time, researchers discovered that cadmium could damage kidneys, weaken bones, and build up in the body with long-term exposure. The more scientists learned, the worse the picture became, and soon every health agency demanded that cadmium vanish from anything that touched food. When these trays were banned, most families were shocked to hear that something so normal had been quietly poisoning them. It still feels surreal that ordinary ice cubes, the kind you never think twice about, once carried risks nobody imagined. Benzene-based rubber cement was a staple in craft rooms and home offices throughout the 1980s, its distinctive sweet smell filling the air whenever someone worked on scrapbooks or school projects. The adhesive spread smoothly, dried quickly, and created bonds that held paper together perfectly. Families kept jars in desk drawers and anywhere creative projects might happen. Children used it freely for homework and art class creations, often leaning close to watch glue spread across construction paper. What nobody realized was that benzene evaporates readily at room temperature, filling enclosed spaces with fumes that entered lungs with every breath. Parents helped kids with projects in small bedrooms where ventilation was poor and exposure was high. When scientists confirmed that benzene caused blood cancers and serious health problems, formulations changed almost overnight. Manufacturers switched to safer solvents and old jars disappeared from store shelves. Families who had spent years crafting together understood that the familiar smell they associated with creativity had been quietly dangerous. Today, benzene-based rubber cement remains banned, a reminder that innocent hobbies can carry hidden risks. Recalled aluminum wiring connectors were once hailed as the budget-friendly alternative during the wiring shortages of the 1970s, and countless new homes relied on them. Builders loved them because they were cheap, available, and easy to install, and homeowners loved them because nobody complained about a lower electrical bill. But the flaws were already quietly forming in the walls where nobody could see them. Aluminum expanded and contracted far more than copper, and over time these movements loosened the connections that held everything together. A loose electrical connection is not a small problem. It sparks, it overheats, It quietly melts the surrounding material until one night the wall bursts into flames with no warning. Families across the country were stunned when investigators pointed to the same cheap connectors again and again as the hidden culprit. House fires that seemed accidental were suddenly part of a much bigger pattern. When the recalls finally came, they came with urgency, because by then, too many homes had already paid the price. It is unsettling to think that something so small, something meant to keep the lights on, could bring an entire house down. Mercury vapor sun lamps for tanning hung in bathrooms and bedrooms throughout the 1980s, glowing fixtures promising year-round bronze skin without expensive salon visits. Families installed them above mirrors or in tanning corners, believing they had brought professional beauty treatments into their homes. People stood beneath these lamps for minutes at a time, exposing faces and bodies to ultraviolet radiation they could feel warming their skin. What nobody understood was that mercury vapor lamps produced intense UV radiation far exceeding safe limits, and mercury inside posed hazards if bulbs shattered. Eyes suffered damage from unshielded exposure, and skin absorbed radiation doses that accumulated with every session. Some people developed burns and conditions revealing their consequences years later. When researchers documented dangers of unregulated UV exposure and mercury risks, home tanning lamps faced strict regulations. Many models were pulled from stores entirely. Families who spent years chasing golden tans learned they had been exposing themselves to radiation nobody should absorb casually. Today, those old sun lamps remain a reminder that beauty trends can carry costs becoming clear only with time. Plastic wraps containing PVC and DEHA were considered one of the ultimate conveniences in a 1970s kitchen. You pulled the crinkly sheet from the roll, stretched it across leftovers, pressed it tightly around bowls, and trusted it to keep food fresh the way every advertisement promised. It smelled like plastic, it clung to everything, and once it touched warm food, it softened and drooped in a way that felt completely normal at the time. What nobody realized was that heat made the chemicals inside the wrap migrate directly into the food beneath it. Studies later showed that PVC and DEHA leached into meats, cheeses, and even produce when the wrap was warmed, folded, or pressed tightly, especially in lunchboxes left sitting in the sun. Families consumed those chemicals daily without knowing it, believing they were protecting their food instead of contaminating it. Once research revealed that these compounds were endocrine disruptors and possible carcinogens, governments rushed to ban them. It was a sobering moment for households everywhere, especially parents who felt betrayed after using the wrap for school lunches year after year. Today, safer wraps exist, but the memory of how easily something unsafe slipped into every home is hard to forget. It is unsettling to think how many children grew up eating food that carried invisible chemicals only discovered long after the meal was finished. Formaldehyde-treated plywood kitchen cabinets lined the walls of countless homes in the 1980s, their smooth surfaces and affordable prices making them popular for families upgrading cooking spaces. The glue holding wood layers together contained formaldehyde resins that cured slowly over months, releasing invisible gas into kitchens where families spent hours each day. People cooked meals, ate breakfast, and helped children with homework while breathing fumes they could not smell at low concentrations. Some families noticed headaches, irritated eyes, or persistent coughs without connecting symptoms to their new cabinets. The formaldehyde levels were highest when cabinets were new, but off-gassing continued for years, especially in warm kitchens where windows stayed closed. When researchers published findings linking chronic exposure to respiratory illness and cancer risks, the construction industry faced immediate pressure. Regulators set strict limits on formaldehyde emissions, forcing manufacturers to reformulate adhesives entirely. Families who had proudly remodeled their kitchens wondered what they had been breathing. Those cabinets became symbols of how progress can poison the spaces meant to nourish us. Polyurethane cushions without fire barriers were the soft, bouncy heart of nearly every couch and living room chair in the 1970s, and nobody thought twice about sitting on them for hours. The furniture looked cozy, inviting, and perfectly harmless, but inside the cushions was a ticking time bomb. The foam was unbelievably flammable and burned hotter and faster than most people could even imagine. All it took was a dropped cigarette, a spark from a fireplace, or a child playing too close to a lamp for the entire cushion to erupt in flames. Families often had no warning at all, because the foam did not smolder slowly the way natural fibers did. Instead, it ignited instantly and produced thick black smoke that filled a room before anyone had time to react. Firefighters began reporting the same horrifying pattern in house after house, and investigators realized that these cushions were turning small accidents into full-blown tragedies. Government stepped in and demanded fire-resistant barriers, but only after far too many avoidable disasters. Looking back, it is unsettling to know that a perfectly ordinary piece of furniture could transform into something so dangerous without a single person in the home realizing it. Chlorofluorocarbon aerosol air fresheners sat on bathroom shelves and kitchen counters throughout the 1980s, their pressurized cans promising instant freshness with every spray. Families used them liberally after cooking and whenever rooms needed a quick refresh. The hiss of aerosol became familiar, followed by clouds of scented mist settling onto every surface. People sprayed directly into air they were breathing, trusting anything sold for household use must be safe. What nobody understood was that chlorofluorocarbons drifted upward through the atmosphere, accumulating in layers that would eventually damage the ozone layer protecting Earth from harmful radiation. Closer to home, the propellants irritated lungs, especially in small bathrooms where ventilation was poor. When scientists discovered the environmental catastrophe unfolding overhead, bans came quickly and globally. Manufacturers reformulated products, and CFC propellants vanished from consumer goods entirely. Families who had spent years freshening their homes learned they had been contributing to planetary damage with every casual spray. Today, those old aerosol cans represent an era when convenience outweighed consequences nobody understood. Paint strippers with methylene chloride were considered the heavy-duty answer to stubborn paint jobs, and anyone tackling home renovation in the 1970s probably had a can of it in the garage. It worked fast, cut through layers of paint like nothing else, and made do-it-yourself. Projects feel like magic. But the warning labels were vague, and the risks were far worse than anyone realized. Methylene chloride turns into carbon monoxide inside the body, and in enclosed spaces, it can kill within minutes. Many people brushed it on in basements, bathrooms, or sheds with no ventilation at all. They would kneel down, breathe deeply without thinking, and collapse before they understood what was happening. The tragedies piled up, from weekend hobbyists to seasoned professionals, all undone by a chemical sold at any hardware shop. By the time regulators stepped in, the pattern was already undeniable. These products were simply too dangerous for everyday homes. Looking back, it is hard to believe that something so lethal sat quietly on store shelves for years, disguised as just another home improvement tool. Polychlorinated biphenyl filled fluorescent light ballasts hummed quietly in ceilings throughout the 1980s, providing steady illumination in kitchens, basements, and garages without drawing attention. The ballasts regulated electrical current to keep tubes flickering evenly, and the PCB oil inside helped dissipate heat while preventing fires. Families rarely thought about what was hidden inside metal housings bolted above their heads. But when ballasts aged and overheated, they often leaked, dripping oily residue onto surfaces below without anyone noticing. Some leaked slowly for years, creating invisible contamination zones on countertops, shelves, and floors. The PCBs did not evaporate easily. They clung to dust particles and spread through ventilation systems, accumulating in carpets throughout the home. When scientists confirmed that PCBs caused cancer and disrupted hormones, the manufacturing ban was swift, but millions of ballasts already installed remained in place. Families discovered the danger only when fixtures failed or during renovations. Cleanup required specialized procedures and protective equipment. Today, those old ballasts stand as proof that even simple overhead lights can harbor secrets. Formaldehyde foam insulation was marketed as the miracle shortcut for any homeowner who wanted a warm house without spending a fortune, and countless families in the 1970s eagerly embraced it. Contractors filled walls with this airy white foam that expanded quickly, hardened fast, and seemed like a modern solution to drafty living rooms. For a brief moment, it felt like every neighborhood was upgrading at once, sealing up their homes with what was promised to be the future of budget-friendly insulation. But soon, the complaints started rolling in, and they were not mild ones. People began waking up with burning eyes, aching lungs, raw throats, and an unshakable chemical smell that clung to every room in the house. Children developed chronic coughs, pets fell sick, and entire families wondered why their homes suddenly felt hostile instead of safe. Investigators eventually discovered that this foam released dangerous formaldehyde fumes that built up inside sealed houses, especially in the winter months when windows stayed shut. The government banned it once the evidence became undeniable, but thousands were left with walls that continued to off-gas for years. What started as a cheap improvement became one of the most regretted home upgrades of the decade, a reminder that not every shortcut is worth taking. Carbon tetrachloride spot removers were tucked under laundry room sinks and inside cleaning closets throughout the 1980s, trusted solutions for stubborn stains nothing else could touch. The liquid worked almost magically on grease, ink, and mysterious marks on clothing, carpets, and upholstery. Families kept bottles handy, dabbing the clear solvent onto fabric and watching stains dissolve before their eyes. What nobody explained was that carbon tetrachloride converts to poison gas when it evaporates, and using it in poorly ventilated spaces could lead to dizziness, unconsciousness, or worse. People knelt over treated carpets, leaned into closets where freshly cleaned garments hung, and breathed deeply without knowing the risk. Some homeowners used it in enclosed bathrooms where air barely circulated. Emergency rooms saw poisoning cases difficult to diagnose because the source seemed ordinary. When regulators understood how dangerous this common cleaner was, the bans came quickly and permanently. Families discarded bottles they had relied on for years, aware that their stain fighter had been threatening their health. Today, carbon tetrachloride remains banned, a relic from when cleaning solutions could kill. Microwave oven models without radiation shielding were the wild frontier of new technology in the 1970s. Families were mesmerized by the idea of heating food in seconds, and microwaves became a symbol of progress and modern living. But early units were imperfect, rushed to market before the science was fully understood. Some leaked microwave energy through gaps in the door seal or thin shielding, and people reported headaches, dizziness, and strange tingling sensations when standing too close. Parents began noticing pets acting oddly near the machines, and technicians documented power leaks far above safe limits. Regulators stepped in fast once the danger became impossible to ignore. New standards forced manufacturers to redesign the doors, seals, and internal shielding, making the earlier models illegal to sell. It is unsettling to think how many families treated these early microwaves like harmless appliances, unaware that standing in the wrong spot could expose them to invisible energy no one yet understood. LEED glazed ceramic coffee mugs sat proudly in kitchen cupboards throughout the 1980s, their colorful finishes and handcrafted charm making them favorites for morning rituals. Many came from overseas markets or craft fairs where artisans used traditional glazing techniques passed down through generations. What nobody realized was that lead in those beautiful glazes slowly dissolved into hot acidic beverages like coffee and citrus juice. Every morning sip delivered invisible doses of a neurotoxin that accumulated in bones and bloodstreams over time. Families collected these mugs as souvenirs and everyday essentials, never suspecting the vessel holding their comfort drink carried serious risk. Children drank hot cocoa from colorful cups, absorbing lead at levels that affected developing brains severely. When testing revealed dangerously high lead content in imported ceramics, regulators cracked down on manufacturing standards. Many beloved mugs were quietly discarded once families understood the truth. The ban protected future generations, but those who spent years drinking from contaminated cups wondered what damage had accumulated. It remains a reminder that beauty and danger sometimes share the same glaze. Electric can openers without blade guards seemed like a futuristic upgrade for a 1970s kitchen. They promised hands-free ease, smooth cutting, and a modern convenience that felt like a small luxury people loved showing them off, pressing a button and watching the can spin as the lid lifted effortlessly. But the early models hid a serious flaw. They had exposed blades that could slice fingers as easily as metal, especially when children tried to use them or when adults reached to remove a stuck lid. Emergency rooms began reporting the same pattern of deep cuts and accidental injuries. What should have been an improvement turned into a hazard that waited for the slightest mistake. Manufacturers rushed to add guards and redesign the safety features, but the early models had already caused far too many accidents. It is a strange feeling knowing that a tool meant to make life easier ended up drawing more blood than any kitchen knife ever did. Mercury-filled tilt switches inside wall thermostats were the silent heartbeat of temperature control in 1980s homes, clicking softly whenever furnaces kicked on or air conditioning started humming. Inside each small glass capsule was a bead of liquid mercury that rolled back and forth, completing the electrical circuit that kept families comfortable. People adjusted these thermostats daily without knowing they were handling devices containing one of the most toxic heavy metals on Earth. If a thermostat broke during replacement, that tiny mercury bead could spill onto floors and vents, vaporizing slowly into the air for years. Families breathed it in without realizing the source, and children sometimes played with the shiny liquid if they found it. Once scientists documented how mercury accumulated in bodies and damaged nervous systems, regulators moved quickly to phase out these switches. Homeowners were urged to dispose of them through hazardous waste programs. The ban brought safer digital alternatives, but the memory of those toxic capsules lingers as a warning about comfort and danger sharing the same wall. Electric extension cords without grounding or heat limits were once tossed casually into every junk drawer in the 1970s. They powered lamps, radios, holiday lights, and entire living room setups without anyone considering what might happen under the strain. Most families used the same cord for years, letting it twist, fray, bend, and tangle behind couches where nobody ever checked it. But these early cords had no grounding protection, no heat cutoff, and often no insulation strong enough to withstand long-term use. As electricity flowed through overloaded wires, the heat built up silently, melting plastic, exposing metal, and creating sparks just waiting for something flammable to touch. House fires that seemed random at first began revealing the same culprit hiding in the ashes. Firefighters kept finding extension cords scorched to nothing. Their ends fused to outlets, investigators pushed for stricter standards, and eventually the unregulated cords were banned in favor of grounded, temperature-tested designs. Families were shocked to learn that the thin cord they trusted to bring power into their homes had been one of the biggest fire hazards they owned. It is unsettling to think that a simple everyday tool, used so casually, held the potential to destroy an entire home without any warning at all. Lead-painted wooden Venetian blinds hung in bedroom windows and living room bays throughout the 1980s, elegant fixtures nobody questioned or worried about. Families tilted the slats to let morning light in or shut them tight against afternoon sun, never realizing every tug of the cord released toxic dust into the air. The lead in the paint made finishes durable and resistant to chipping, which manufacturers advertised as a selling point for busy households. Children pressed their faces against the slats to peek outside, running fingers along painted surfaces while parents called them to dinner. Over time, the paint degraded invisibly, shedding particles onto windowsills, carpets, and the hands of everyone who touched them. Researchers eventually connected these blinds to alarming blood lead levels in children, prompting urgent recalls and immediate regulatory action. Families were stunned to learn something so ordinary had been contaminating their homes for years. The bans arrived swiftly once evidence mounted, forcing manufacturers to reformulate and homeowners to replace what they had trusted. Today, those vintage blinds serve as a quiet reminder that danger sometimes hangs in plain sight. High-lead ceramic holiday decorations once lined mantels and shelves throughout the winter season, adding color and sparkle to family homes. People displayed painted figurines, candle holders, and ceramic ornaments passed down through generations. What they did not know was that the glossy paint and glaze often contained dangerously high levels of lead. As these decorations aged, tiny flakes and dust particles settled onto furniture, carpets, and even children's hands. Toddlers who played near decorated mantles or chewed on ceramic ornaments were unknowingly exposed to lead, a heavy metal that can cause lifelong developmental damage. Parents never imagined that something so festive could carry such a hidden danger. Once researchers tested older ceramics and found extreme lead levels, governments banned many of the glazes and paints used at the time. Families were urged to pack away heirlooms or handle them with caution. It is still troubling to think that the cheerful decorations meant to brighten homes in winter were quietly releasing toxic particles into the same rooms where children played. A full decade of confident bad decisions, sold without shame and bought without question. If this made you laugh, subscribe. The 80s earned it.